Hi everyone, hope you're all doing well. This week we're going to be doing our book reader badge, which is one that I'm quite excited to do because I really love books, I love reading and I love stories, so I'm very excited to share some of my favourite ones with you and talk about them. So, uh, books come in sort of a lot of different styles, you've probably noticed, but we can sort them into two main groups. We can sort them into fiction and non-fiction. Um, so fiction books they're storybooks. They're not real. They're made up, and they tell some sort of story. So something um, with characters and sword fights and magic, or growing a dinosaur. This is a fiction book because it's not real. And the other type is non-fiction, and non-fiction books give us facts and information and teach us things. So there'll be things like a dictionary, or this boring English literature book which teaches you lots of information, but there's no characters or story or anything like that in it. So those are the two main styles of books, and we're going to focus today on fiction books because I think those are probably the books you guys will enjoy reading the most. They're definitely the ones that I like to read. So fiction books come in different styles as well. They'll be written in different ways. So you might have a picture book like How to Grow a Dinosaur, and in here we've got a story with the writing around it, but there are also pictures on every page to go with the story and to make it more enjoyable. Or you might have something like a play, and a play is written in a very special way because you have it says what each character says, and then they read out the lines, and it's almost like a script that actors would use to act it out. So there isn't much description of scenery or story, but instead it's just the words that each character says and the different lines they'll have. Or you'll have something like a novel, and a novel is like a book that's a bit bigger, a bit longer, and they'll just be regular storybooks, but they're a bit thicker. Or you might have something like a graphic novel, which is basically a comic book, and they've got pictures to go with they're mostly pictures, and then they have words in them in little speech bubbles and things like that. And so that's the main difference between a picture book and a graphic novel. Is a picture book will have pictures, but you can still read the story, whereas a graphic novel wouldn't make any sense if you didn't have the pictures. It would just be a bunch of words that didn't go in any real order. So those are the different styles of books, and you'll probably be most familiar with the picture books, but you'll as you go through school and you grow up, you'll find lots of different types of books, and you'll find the style that you like the most. These books can also be sorted in something called genres, and a genre is basically what type of story it is. So you can also sort TV shows and games and things like that into genres as well. And so a couple of examples of genres might be something like fantasy, something like Lord of the Rings with sword fights and magic and knights in armor and dragons. That would be a fantasy story. Or you might have something like a mystery story where you're trying to work out who the murderer is or who stole something. Or maybe a romance where two people are falling in love and it's a story about love. Or sometimes people like horror, which horror is like scary stories and monsters and things like that. Or you might have science fiction, which would happen in space with spaceships and aliens and things like that, which is quite often shortened to sci-fi instead of science fiction because that's a lot to say. So as you read lots of stories, you'll work out which of these are your favourites, which style you like the most. Personally, I like fantasy stories and I like sci-fi stories, but I do like to read lots of different ones because just because it's not necessarily my favourite type doesn't mean it isn't a good story. I don't like to limit myself to just a few. So what have we got to do to get this badge? Well, first of all, you need to tell me about your favourite book. So I'll go first and I'll tell you about my favourite book. It was quite tough for me to narrow this down because I've got a lot of books I really like. Neil Gaiman is one of my favourite authors of all time, and I also really love Frankenstein. But in the end, I went for one called The Sword of Shannara, and this is a fantasy book. So there's sword fights and magic, and it's all about two brothers who have to go on a quest to find a magic sword in order to defeat the evil Warlock Lord. And this is a book that my dad got for me. He picked it up for me in an airport for me to read on holiday when I was 9, and it's just one of my favourite books that I read. So I really like this one because I like the characters and I like the monsters and the adventure and things like that. So I've told you about my favourite book, and I want to hear about what your favourite book is. So tell me maybe a little bit about what happens in it, why it's your favourite, maybe tell me who your favourite character is or what the best part of the book was. I'd love to hear about all of your favourite books. And then once you've done that, your challenge is to design a new cover for this book. So luckily, I actually have the version that my dad had when he read it, and as you can see, they've got two very different front covers. So I quite like this cover. I like this one a lot more. This one has got the castle Panara on it, and it's, you know, it's got a big castle looming on a cliff, and it captures my imagination. I want to know more about this castle and what's going on, and so I want to read it to find out about that. Whereas this one's got some characters finding the sword, which is a big part of the story, so an important thing to show off. So that's the sort of thing you need to think about when you design your front cover. What does a good front cover need? Does it needs maybe the title of the book on it, like we've got here, who wrote the book, so the author, which they've got up there, and then a picture that will make people want to read this book. So maybe it's a key thing that happens in the story or a place or something like that, but it's got to make someone want to read the book. So a lot of times you'll hear the phrase, don't judge a book by its cover, but the cover of a book is very important because people should judge it. They should be able to look at it and think, yeah, this is something I want to read. So you need to think about what's the best thing to put on the front to make someone want to read this book. So that's the first part of this badge. That's your first challenge. The second part of it is you need to show how to look after a book. So if you don't look after it, then books might end up like my granddad's copy of Lord of the Rings, which is falling apart, all the pages are coming out. It's not doing very good at all. So you need to take good care of books if you want them to last a long time, and they will get older over time. My dad's book here, this is 40 years old, and you can see the pages are all going a bit yellow and things are starting to fall out. It does happen, but if you take care of them, then they'll last a lot longer, and then other people can use them and you can reread them again, which is always nice. So a couple of good things to do is, obviously don't throw them around because they're made of paper and they'll break. Try not to spill anything on them. Some people, when they read books, they like to take a page and then bend the page over and fold it instead of using a bookmark, which I think is a horrible thing to do because then the next person can't really use the book to mark their page. So your job is to tell me maybe 4 or 5 things that you have to do in order to take care of a book, or show me a picture of something you've done to take care of your book, like maybe you have a bookshelf for them to live on or something like that. So the third part of this badge is you need to read 6 different books, and I'm sure you've all read 6 different books in your life, so you need to read 6 books starting from now. But I'm feeling nice, so any books that you read last week you can also count. And then once you've read 6 different books, then you'll have ticked off this part of the badge. And then the last part is you need to make a bookmark to go in your books. And then you need to tell me why a bookmark is important. Normally I give you some information about why it's important, but for this one I want you to tell me why it's important. So those are the things that you've got to do. I can't wait to see what you do and to hear about all your favourite books. I think it'll be really great. And I will see you soon.